The roads to a smooth convention seems to be on the pathway for the ruling All Progressive Congress, the APC. After weeks of leadership tussle that plagued the ruling APC, Akpanu Dehe yesterday issued an optimistic statement that gave the impression that Buni had taken back control as the chairman of the party's CECPC. There are indications that all governors elected into the caretaker extraordinary convention planning committee of the ruling All Progressive Congress APC will be standing down in a no victor, no vanquished deal reached with the chairman of the committee and the Yobe State Governor Maimala Buni, and allow all the members of the CECPC to continue and conclude the party's national convention scheduled for March 26, 2022. Already, Osun State Governor Mr. Adigboyega Oyetola, who was a member of the CECPC, have resigned in order to face the forthcoming gubernatorial election, the state wherein he is contesting for a second term. Meanwhile, the fate of the National Secretary of the CECPC, Senator John Akpanu Dehe, remains uncertain, and a decision on him will be reached at the Emergency National Executive Council meeting, NEC, scheduled for tomorrow, which the President will virtually participate. The meeting's one-item agenda is the convention. However, in an arrangement reached with President Muhammadu Buhari in London, the convention will hold on March 26, and former Nasarawa Governor Abdullahi Adamu is expected to emerge new party chairman of the party. Tundu, they seem to be finding their rhythm.
Yes, but I'm now wondering, should the other aspirants to the post of national chairman of APC save their 20 million naira and not bother to buy a form at this point? We don't know, it remains to be seen, but no politicians will fight to the bitter end. Same as Senator Akpanu Dehe. So you're saying that his fate remains unclear, but he seems extremely confident about his fate. It will all, unfold. But what's been reported now is interesting, that APC, in order to give everybody some kind of graceful exit from the botched palace coup, is suggesting now that all the governors should resign from the caretaker committee. As you've just said, Governor Oyetola is resigning to focus on his re-election. So that would also mean Maimala Buni should resign. And I recall raising this with the guests we had on this show, that is all of this just not a huge distraction, because he is a governor of Yobe State. The people of Yobe State are not getting bang for their buck. But I was politely told not to cry more than the bereaved, which seemed fair enough at the time. But now it's all becoming a bit of a mess. So that would mean that Governor Maimala Buni would also resign, and then Governor Buni Bello of Niger State would also resign, leaving the people like Senator John James Akpanu Dehe, if he does survive, as National Secretary. There's also within that party, they have a representative for the Senate, House of Reps, women, physically challenged, and then they have representatives for the other geopolitical zones. You recall David Lyon, who was almost the governor of Bayelsa State. He's found his feet in that committee. Yeah, so very close, but not quite. But another issue is that court ruling about the convention of March 26, which is still hanging over the head of APC like the sword of Damocles. If they're not able to vacate that, all of this sort of positioning is all going to come to naught. They have to find a way to vacate that ruling. So it's not all clear quite yet.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. I think the big issue is as follows. One, will this March 26 convention still hold? Two, if the March 26 convention of the APC holds, what is likely to happen? Because clearly the party is divided. Let nobody come around and tell us again that the party is not divided, that there are disagreements within the party. It is very clear, 1 week after the other. We've been focusing on this subject consistently. And you see that even when you think that the matter has been resolved, something else happens, okay? To further give you the indication that certain forces within the party are trying to, what is that expression again? They are trying to sort themselves out, okay? They are having a showdown. And I think it's instructive that, yes, a decision may have been taken that every governor should step down. Okay, one indication that you can derive from that is that it seems clear that maybe Buni Bello, governor of Niger State, wants to be chairman of the party. And the forces that are behind him, they want to insist that he's there. Because you recall that about 2 days ago, it looked like the El-Rufai camp within the party had already lost out. Now, by this morning, the El-Rufai camp is back in reckoning. Tomorrow, who again is going to play the cards and also be in reckoning? So the All Progressives Congress as a political party is just about to implode. One other signal that I think that analysts of the subject should note is the quick resignation of the governor of Osun State, Governor Oyetola. You know that Governor Oyetola is part of the Tinubu camp. Okay? He haven't resigned and having pulled out, and so it's like saying, okay, you people can carry on. So are we likely to see a situation where the said third force within this particular political party will pull out? And if that were to happen, it will be most unfortunate, because it will mean that the ladder that brought President Buhari to power would, close to the end of his tenure, will have been removed. Okay? He probably has no stake in the matter. He's not looking for a third term. He has made that very clear. But should political leaders who use a particular ladder to get to position allow a situation whereby that ladder is packed up as they leave? So the next meeting that has been talked about, okay, we would like to see what happens at that next meeting. Because if we were to go by the letter from INEC, the paragraphs 2 and 3 of that letter, it will appear that that next meeting can only hold if it is Buni that is presiding over it. Okay? We're told that the president will be part of the meeting. So effectively, the APC is in crisis. I wouldn't be surprised if that party implodes, either before or after the March 26 convention. And I keep making the point that other political parties should watch what is going on in the APC very closely, because it could have implications for how the drama of 2023 plays out. We don't have a dog in the fight, but what is important is that these politicians should place the common interest first, the common good, beyond their ambitions. Now I see a party that is going in all directions, and every little day people are scheming and all that. The drama may be interesting to the PDP, the main opposition party, but even the PDP itself, it's not as if the PDP is in a better position, which is unfortunate for the growth of the political party system in Nigeria and for the consolidation, much talked about, of Nigerian democracy.
So yesterday I started counting scores, Tundu, and with this, it's 1-1. Two sides, the Yahoo force, which you can call the centripetal force, and the 19 governors force, which you can call the centrifugal force. It's 1-1. You know, for me, what nailed the coffin for me yesterday and showed me how really convoluted things are in the APC and how the implosion has started. In fact, I would even call what is happening in the APC implosion, I'll call it a self-immolation. Is the fact that when they went to court yesterday to vacate that court order, they couldn't decide which council was representing Mai Mala Buni and the respondents. The two councils were there to represent him, and they were fighting amongst themselves. And that's why the case had to be adjourned to the 19th of March. So in a case where you can't even get the adequate council to respond or represent, and the case had to be adjourned because the councils are fighting, you would know that these people are out to destroy each other. It is the night of long knives that is happening. And in all of this, I would say, the failure of President Buhari to take a stand and rein the party in, him trying to listen to every side, will be the albatross of this party. And this party is way on its way down, because this will continue. The forces will continue. And it's going to be one day, one drama from now. I posit, and I very much doubt, that the 26th will be reality. Probably it might be reality. I might be wrong. But from what we're seeing on ground, all is not clear. Akpanu Dehe, that was being optimistic, and please, I apologize, I might have murdered his name. Please forgive me, sir. that was being optimistic had to be followed to his office yesterday with 4 security men before he made that very optimistic statement. So it shows you that everything is not right. It is still a free-for-all in the APC. And most importantly, Nigerians are watching. All of this is happening amidst queues returning to the streets of Lagos again. All of this is happening amidst the finance minister telling us now that they are using the Eurobond money we borrowed to do subsidy. How can you borrow to subsidize where you will pay long term? All of this is happening amidst no aviation fuel and the likes in this country. So we'll keep watching. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we have Rotu Sudiri, Michael Wilson, and Aaron Akeja to give us updates on Africa global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rotu Sudiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Sundu. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. We have a special report on the latest on the issue of low power supply with the GENCOs threatening darkness across Nigeria. Let's take a listen.
In the past couple of weeks, the already bad power supply in the country has worsened as players in the electricity sector continue to trade blames as to whose table the buck stops. Power generation companies, GENCOs, under the Association of Power Generation Companies, or APGC, said the power shortage across Nigeria is worsening because they have been owed 1.6 trillion naira since 2013 by the Nigerian government. APGC's Executive Secretary, Joy Ogaji, said one of the reasons why the power plants are down is due to inefficient management of the national grid. The power generation companies outlined their challenges below. GENCOs are currently owed 1.644 trillion naira. GENCOs have exhausted all their borrowing sources as the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, had reportedly warned banks to desist from lending money to them. Most of the generating units are down and they need more to fix them. They want money to pay their gas suppliers because it is a contractual obligation based on prepayment. The group of power generation companies says if these issues are sorted, more power will be made available to Nigerians. They say despite the current challenges, the GENCOs are still generating an average of 4,000 megawatts.
The issues span across the entire power sector, starting from, speaking specifically about the GENCOs that produce power with gas. It starts from gas generation to gas transport, all the way to the generation of electricity, transmission and distribution. The entire system is broken. And, there can be blame game across the entire sector. TCN is blaming GENCO. Now, 5 or so years ago, what we were told is that there's enough generation in Nigeria and we need to focus only on distribution. Now, we've left distribution and we're back talking about generation. So the entire sector is broken. Even if we generate, for example, 12,000 megawatts of electricity today, the TCN can't carry it. TCN can carry reliably only about 5,500 megawatts. So we need to address every single part of this sector. And the way to address it is not by government addressing it, it's by the private sector completely driving this. Otherwise, next year we're still going to be saying the same thing.
But the debt claimed by the GENCOs has been refuted by the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company, or NBET. NBET disputes the figures quoted by the power generation companies. It says only companies with active gas supply and transportation contracts are paid for utilized capacity. That in the country, only 5 power generation companies with active gas purchase agreement, the GPA, are entitled to be paid for unused capacity. They also claim that the GENCOs have the capacity to generate 9,000 megawatts, but are not accurate, as inspections by NBET have shown that the so-called capacity does not exist.
We have about 11,000 kilometers of gas pipelines in Nigeria today. Most of them is controlled by the government, okay? And the same thing in gas generation. Some private companies generate gas to sell, but largely, of all the gas we produce in this country now, only about 21% goes to, is used in Nigeria. Out of that 21%, part of it is used for petrochemicals and other things. A little part of it is now used for power generation. So the only way we can start to solve this problem realistically is we need to completely unbundle this. We don't need a system operator or a market operator. We don't need over-regulation of the industry.
Nigerians are calling for a review of the electricity agreement entered by the federal government because since 2013, when the power sector was partially privatized till date, weak and inadequate infrastructures in the areas of transmission and distribution have continued to make the sector inefficient with poor results. Benny Ark, Arise News.
Great reporting there from Benny Ark. Also, Rufai just touched on this. Zainab Ahmed, according to Reuters, spoke to Reuters and said that apparently Nigeria is going to tap Eurobond proceeds in order to pay for fuel subsidies. I just heard Rufai talking about this a second ago. I don't know about you. If I'm a bondholder and an issuer is telling me they're going to subsidize consumption with debt, the next time they come to the markets to raise more debts, the risk premium on that debt is going to rise because of the disarray that their fiscal structure is and the decision-making around this, if this is actually true. Inflation, I did say yesterday that we would see inflation between 15.7 to 15.9. It came in at 15.7% year-on-year for February. Core inflation, which strips out volatile food items and has energy as its main component, that was the largest rise there at 14.01%. Month-on-month, we saw increases across the board for inflation. Headline, food, core, urban, rural. The Bureau of Statistics also released trade data. Our foreign trade data deficit has now risen to 1.94 trillion. You just subtract your imports from your exports. If your exports are more, you have a surplus. If your imports are more, you get a deficit. So 51% increase in exports in 2021, 18.9 trillion, 55, almost 60% of that was, of course, oil. Imports is what we saw the issue there. The rebound, the recovery in 2021 from the recession in 2020, a surge in imports, the weaker naira, demand for foreign goods, 20.8 trillion. You subtract that and you have a 986% climb in your deficit. If you look at this graph, we've recorded two in red at the bottom of your screen. 2016 recession, 291 billion naira deficit. 2020, 178 billion. And the largest one so far in 2021, 1.9 trillion. You can see the surpluses in green in 2017, 2018, and 2019. I believe we've also got this memo from a bank. Everybody is trying to find out which bank this is, that ordered their staff to leave their premises by 5:01 p.m. It's believed it's because of diesel costs and running the gen. There are a couple tweets from lots of testimonials from people who are responding to this. If we take a look at one from here, I think it's Gracious or so. This person said that in their school, they have had to run their gen for only 1 hour. Yeah, we now put our diesel generator in school for 1 hour here in Lekki. The matter is getting out of hand, responding to that memo. And then another one saying that in their office as well is the same thing. Something very similar is happening in my workplace. This diesel price hike is nobody's meat.
So sad.
I see your point about the banks. You don't know the identity of this particular bank.
We're trying to find out which bank it is.
Okay, the banks are supposed to close at 5 o'clock and the headquarters at 7 p.m.
Yes.
Look, if you ask me, apart from reconciliation and all of that, no bank should even be open till 7 p.m.
Exactly.
Whether it's the headquarters or not.
I don't agree.
Once upon a time in this country, people used to carry mats to go to the banks. Because before you could be attended to, you have to lay out a mat outside the bank or inside the banking hall.
Wow.
That direct experience of it, okay? Then they digitalize the operations.
Right.
ATM operations came and all of that, right? But even in spite of that, it is shocking to hear that people still have to sleep in the banks. That is the staff who are doing reconciliation. We should have a truly modern kind of banking system where, everything should just work clockwork, manner, as it is done in other parts of the world. Do you know how much damage many of these banks have done to families, right?
Exactly.
I recall those days when, people around me used to come home at 11 p.m., 12 p.m. They would say they are busy working. And I would say, no, I don't need the money from your bank, okay? Just come home and attend to don't worry. Okay, so this is the point I'm making. Yeah. We should keep modernizing. Whatever the identity of that bank is, I don't think it really matters. Right. We just want an efficient, customer-oriented banking system. Whether it is diesel or not, this matter of diesel, we are all in it together.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that we have found ourselves in this particular place. As for electricity, I saw the gentleman there talking about GENCOs and all of that. Two questions, very quickly, that we should raise. This government that is in power campaigned on the platform of electricity supply.
Indeed, that is true.
A former minister of power promised that within any government that cannot deal with the problem of electricity supply in 6 months is not a serious government. And I've seen people bringing that up. Now, one of the first things that this administration did was to attack the previous administration's electricity sector reform. And the discos, the investors in the discos were specially targeted and demonized. Okay, what has happened? Let us ask the question. Those who led the assault against the discos, okay, what explanation do they have to give us now? And as for the GENCOs, the generating companies, they are supposed to be paid by the federal government and MBET, the bulk trader, that's MBET. Okay, why is MBET not meeting its obligations? So the electricity sector reform program that was supposed to go well has now been completely upended. And the people that have been punished for that are ordinary Nigerians. And with diesel at about 680, 670 naira, even the more privileged members of the community are now all living in darkness. We will, if we're not careful, produce a generation of Nigerian children who will begin to get accustomed to darkness.
I can imagine. Real quickly, Rotus, number one, let's talk solutions. We need a multi-grid system. This single grid cannot work. And you see, power is not rocket science. There's a company called Nesco in Jos. It used to produce power, started producing power for the teen industry in Jos in the 1920s. That company still exists till today. It still meets the obligation of its clients and gives them power because it sends power directly to them. It's happening in this country, in Jos, in this country. Secondly, we need to bring more investors in. Thirdly, we need to try as much as possible to look for alternative sources. Number four, government could hands off this. Focus on rural electrification like they do with solar panel and the likes. But hands off this, get real investors in, and that's the way we can power the sector. Because nothing will change. Azura will churn out power to a moribund grid system, then nothing happens.
Because the wheeling capacity.
Because there's no capacity. MBET will run out of money to make payments. So nothing happens. Secondly, when I saw the trade deficit, my response is Wahala Day.
Trade deficit is large.
For a country this size, 920,000, 3,000 square kilometers of land, over 200 million people, and you can only churn out 18 trillion in export, it's a shame on all of us. We need to do something about trade. The government needs to step up. And we're importing way more, so we have a deficit of 1.9 trillion.
That's correct.
Which is problematic.
Our deficit,
and that's why the government must spur small businesses to be tools of trade. We've got 41 million of them, SMEs in this country. At least any government coming in now should be able to double our export to about 50, 60 trillion. That 20 trillion we're exporting, if you add gas to it, we can add another 20 trillion, which is gas. There's a long way for us to go, Nigeria. We can succeed. We're a great nation, but we need to get to work and we stop deceiving ourselves.
Well, there isn't much time left, but I just want to piggyback on what you said about, well, I always have to find a silver lining in this whole diesel disaster. If people can actually have some kind of work-life balance, then good. And I think that there's so many low-hanging fruits that we need to look at in the development of this country. It's not always about the bottom line. And if you are trying to even improve your bottom line, like you said, there are more efficient ways of doing that. Use technology. People should not sacrifice their family on the altar of their career. It can never be worth it. Having a banker sitting in an office till midnight, it's a complete absurdity. You're clearly doing something wrong. So this is the one thing that we can get from this disaster, and that it continues, then it's almost worth it. Well, thank you so much, Rotus.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now for Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. All right. First of all, then a bit of a rebound as far as stocks are concerned around the Asia Pacific region. Hong Kong up about more than 10%, mostly higher, but fairly mixed in China. Remember, this spike of COVID is actually affecting them, and there are severe lockdowns in various profitable parts of the country. Hang Seng tumbled nearly 6% on Tuesday. So what it's done overnight is to recap most of that ground. This is the most, though, as far as China is concerned, the most severe COVID outbreak it's seen since the height of the pandemic in 2020. In Japan, the Nikkei up a little. Now, China says that it wants to steer clear of any Russia sanctions. It's saying China is not a party to the crisis, nor does it want the sanctions to affect China. China has the right to safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. And since Russia's attack on Ukraine, Beijing has refused to call it even an invasion. And it said China would maintain normal trade with both Ukraine and Russia. China. Now, I mentioned that the COVID spike actually has worsened in China. 15,000 people now affected, and the Dongguan city, basically these industrial areas, are now actually shutting down, and only people who are involved in complete government and utility work are being allowed in to work. Let's go to the United States, and of course, overshadowing everything, not just the war, but the Fed today. It's a bet. It's a no-brainer that they're going to increase interest rates today. The question is how much? 0.25% or 0.5%. I suspect the former. That's what the markets are saying. This is the first rate hike since 2018, and the market mood really over there. Well, they're saying that equities may take it on a little chin, but the fixed income markets won't, and it's going to be a difficult one to swallow, even though there's been plenty of notice about this. And just a line about President Joe Biden: he's signed a funding bill to keep the government running through till September. He's also sending $13.5 billion in aid to Ukraine. That's to helping refugees, and also for defensive equipment and training for the country's military. As far as courtrooms are concerned in the United States today, the Theranos saga continues. You remember that business with Elizabeth Holmes, and she was found. She was found guilty of various counts. Now her Sunny Balwani, the top deputy and ex-boyfriend, faces allegations continuing with that case. So that's something legally which will start today. Opening statements begin today. Russia may be getting close to a historic debt default. This hasn't happened since the 1980s, and it's about the interest in dollars which are to be paid on its debt. Now, the irony of this is that Russia was once seen to be one of the most credit-worthy countries in the world. Now it isn't. Russia is pushing to try to get this paid in rubles. I suspect that will meet with fairly deaf ears, given the fall in the ruble that we've noted on this program over the past few days. As far as the EU is concerned, they're worried that the Ukraine war will actually hugely affect confidence, and I think they're probably right about that. If you remember from 2022, this year, they were saying that originally growth would be quite high, about 4%, just over 4%. Now they think it'll be a lot lower. How low it will be, they're not actually saying. Every country is facing a cost of living crisis right now. The UK is no exception. The thing about the UK is that there have been stronger public finances, unemployment's fallen, and so therefore the Chancellor Rishi Sunak under a lot of pressure to help people who are caught in this cost of living crisis. Boris Johnson, for his part, is going to Saudi Arabia in a bid to ask them to increase production, ditch Russian oil and all the rest of it. It's difficult that because the Saudis not actually speaking to the United States. But Johnson feels he has a relationship with the leaders in Saudi, and it may well work. Spare a thought for those Western brands that have not been able to exit Russia. There's some quite considerable ones here because Marks & Spencer, Burger King, Marriott, and Accor. The problem with these companies is that they have been involved in very complicated third-party situations within Russia, and it's not easy to break away from all that. Oil, actually, yesterday, the heavy losses, really, and then, it just really revolves around what appears to be happening in the war between Russia and Ukraine. Quoting prices is really a silly game right now. It's so volatile, but it is that any bit of optimism is what the market wants to hear, and that tends to bring the oil price down. And then finally, nickel trading begins on Wednesday. You'll remember that there was a huge huge amount of reverse betting going on in the market last week, which caused it to propel the price of nickel to 50% up, $100,000 a ton on March the 8th. And even though there was stress testing, they'd never seen anything like this. We may see more limits on prices today. But anyway, that's the London Metal Exchange starting trading in nickel today. That is the global view.
All right. What's this ding-dong thing about oil prices? It's up this minute, it's down the next minute. Is it based on, reaction of the forces of demand and supply? And secondly, is it official now that with all the sanctions, because there's a lot going on in the Russian economy, that the Russian economy has been, decimated because there are inflationary pressures now with what is happening to the ruble, and increasingly they will start having balance of trade problems in Russia?
Let me, if I may, Rufai, I hate to do this to you, but pick you up on decimated, which means the classic thing that is reduced by 10%, as you know. Of course, it's much more than that as far as Russia's concerned. We have no idea what's happening in the economy there. It is undoubtedly being hit by sanctions, no question about that. And I'm looking at the latest. Now, this is an interesting story coming out of the ECB. This is an exclusive one to Reuters. They're actually saying this morning that they've placed a whole swathe of Russian residents under the scanner to find out that they're not being used as a backdoor method of actually getting money into Russia right now. The oil price, well, as you know, it's extremely volatile. What we tend to see, of course, is the futures market rather than what is actual the spot trades, which are nothing to do with long-term contracts and the rest of it. And that's something that we shouldn't forget, that there are underlying long-term contracts which have been set in stone and can't actually be broken unless both sides want to walk away from them, and under these kind of conditions they don't. So I'm afraid that volatility will continue. What we really hope is, as we do in most of these things, that in terms of, for example, retailers at the pump are taking no notice of this volatility and are still looking at long-term wholesale prices. I was just yesterday amongst a group of energy analysts who are saying precisely this, that it's very easy to get carried away with the noise. And this is what the markets do. This is what trading is all about. You never stand still because you're always making money, whether it's going up or it's going down. That's the reality of it. What we're not seeing is the long-term impact about this. And they were even running a story here yesterday that petrol pump prices are on the way down because of the fall in the wholesale oil price. So riddle all that together. It's difficult to make these predictions on a day-to-day basis.
The Fed, certainly, as you said, will raise interest rates today, as they promised. So it's a matter of hours. But the question is, how far can they go? And can the Fed raise the interest rate without causing a recession? Because Paul Volcker, whom Jerome Powell describes as an intellectual hero, when he went the same way in the 70s and early 80s, caused a great recession. But I wanted to ask you about Russia. Now, about 345 companies have pulled out of Russia, but you refer to some companies that have stayed back because they are third-party franchises. Okay, that's fine. But Russia is threatening to nationalize assets of those countries, of those companies that may have left, those businesses. Is Russia just bluffing? Will it be able to do it? Second, it has just placed travel sanctions on 13 major American political figures, including President Biden and his son, and even the spokesperson. Well, do you think that has some quality in terms of a response? And finally, Boris Johnson, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, is going to Saudi Arabia and the UAE. He's talking about an energy strategy. How about that as an energy strategy? Despite the fact that the countries is going to have in place dictators with very poor, human rights records. It looks like this international politics is just about convenience rather than honesty, sincerity. What do you think?
couldn't agree more. It's about convenience, and unfortunately, it's all about bedfellows in difficult times, isn't it? Really, you're absolutely right to point to those. I think there were 18 executions in Saudi on Saturday, and a lot of Boris Johnson's own party, let alone the Labour Party, are warning him that it's playing very dangerously. The diplomats behind this, what they're saying is that this is not something which is going to happen overnight, and it is complicated by the fact that the rulers of Saudi are not actually speaking to the United States because of the Khashoggi accusations, which were last year, the murder or the death of that journalist, which is being firmly pointed at Saudi by the United States. So all this is tumbling around and so on. I still feel that there's this weird phrase that they have in the markets: the only cure for high prices is high prices. You know what that's saying? In other words, and I believe this, if things get to a certain kind of level, then people simply pull back. And a $200 barrel of oil points to all sorts of different directions as far as the oil markets are concerned. So I think we should bear that in mind. I think if he is, I think that the UAE and Saudi will be looking at this and thinking very much about themselves here. But whether if Johnson is marginally successful, it'll be a good move. As far as Russia sanctions on the United States are concerned, I did note actually that some of these sanctions are directed towards Joe Biden's deceased father, which suggests to me that the research has not been very well done in Russia. It won't make any difference at all. I think it's merely a thrash of a tail against the sanctions that are being put on Russia. What is happening in Russia? Who knows? I still feel as though looking forward, we have to think what the end game is here, and how the president, who is now one of the most reviled figures in the world, according to other statesmen in other countries, actually finds a way out of this and a successful exit from all this to save face. It's very, very difficult to understand how that's going to happen. So I suggest that such has been the unanimity of the Western world against Russia and what it's actually doing. I feel as though there will be a successful mood. Whether it will encompass Saudi and the UAE, I think we wait to see. They're not going to say anything very quickly.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Wilson. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure to have you back. Still the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. For COVID-19 update, Adeso Moro is here. Adeso, great to have you. Good morning as always.
Good morning, Rufai. Great to be here as always. Good morning, Tundu, and good morning, Dr. Abati. Well, there have now been over 461 million COVID-19 infections. According to the Johns Hopkins University, over 6 million deaths have been recorded so far as well. And at least 10.7 billion vaccine doses have been administered. Well, to Nigeria, where the government says it will no longer publish daily COVID-19 infections and deaths. According to the NCDC, effective today, the data will be shared only on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. No reason was given for this, but we saw it coming. We expected this day to come as the numbers of infections recede and the country not recording any COVID-19 related deaths in a long time. And this decision by the Nigerian government is not peculiar. We've seen other countries around the world follow in the same path as the virus fades. But here's a dashboard of the most important figures so far in Nigeria. It shows you the number of tests conducted so far, those confirmed positive, those who have recovered, and those we have lost to this virus. However, daily vaccinations figures will remain, and in the last 24 hours, the NPHCDA says 91,447 individuals showed up for a first dose, while another 97,481 people showed up for their second jabs across the country, the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. Now, away from Nigeria, reports suggest that the United States, the European Union, India, and South Africa have reached a tentative agreement on key elements of a long-sought limited intellectual property waiver for COVID-19 vaccines. Well, this tentative agreement among the four members would only apply to vaccines, not tests, not therapeutics, not any other thing but the vaccines, and it still needs formal approval from these parties before it can be considered official. Also yet to be resolved is the length of the waivers. According to sources familiar with this agreement, it would apply only to countries that exported less than 10% of global vaccine doses in 2021. You recall that the WTO Director General Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala had brokered some sort of talks late last year between these four countries away from the larger group, as there was no headway, having the pharmaceuticals and a lot of countries that are still blocking these waivers. However, we are seeing the EU budge, and of course we hope that more countries will budge for countries to be able to produce the vaccines and scale up. Meanwhile, Pfizer-BioNTech is seeking emergency authorization from the US federal regulators for a second booster shot, and this will be for adults 65 and older. This authorization is for a fourth dose. Recall that Pfizer-BioNTech is already a 2-dose regimen vaccine, and a booster will make it a third dose, so this is a fourth dose. It is believed that this request is based heavily on data from Israel, where such shots are already authorized, but we also know that the Pfizer chief executive, Dr. Bola, has repeatedly said over the past weeks that he believed the additional dose would be necessary to bolster protection against infection. And finally, this morning, public tours of the White House will resume April 15th after more than 2 years when they were suspended because of the pandemic. According to the White House statement, the free tours will operate on Fridays and Saturdays only. Masks will be optional, and the White House statement makes no mention of vaccines. However, guests cannot attend if they have experienced COVID symptoms, come into contact with anyone who tested positive, or they themselves have tested for the virus in the previous 10 days before their visits. Back to you guys.
Thank you so much, Adeswa. We have to leave it there today.